And it's seen in red here because we'll see it on the 2026 cover shortly. This time, we'll see the same fist raised in blue. It's in
blue
because it represents the Republican Party. Red represents the color. Blue represents the Democrats. We'll see that duality through those colors. There's a lot of opposition.
So, in 2025, the Republican Party was in revolt. They won the elections. Now, it's the Democratic Party. Who is this?
This is a former painter who defended women's rights. I can't think of his name right now, but I'm going to react very harshly. There are a lot of arrests, and right here, the blue arm is there, and there are Democrats and handcuffs and handcuffs.
Here, yes.
Of course, so, the governments are being harsh. Quote, "We'll show their reactions and this will be accompanied by an economic crisis, conflicts, local tanks, everywhere in the world, look at the tank details." And that's part of it. That's why the wolves on America. They're going to react very harshly. There are a lot of arrests, and right here, the blue arm is there, and there are Democrats and handcuffs and handcuffs.
Here, yes.
Of course, so, the governments are being harsh. Quote, "We'll show their reactions and this will be accompanied by an economic crisis, conflicts, local tanks, everywhere in the world, look at the tank details." Even a tiny tank here, different here, everywhere, this indicates a conflictual environment.
So, what I understand, Hamza, is that the world Ahad 2026. We are entering a difficult year politically, economically and militarily. And if you had to express it in one word, would you say chaos?
Chaos, chaos, chaos has defined 2026 as chaos in one word.
So let's do it like this. Let's take a commercial break. Thank you. When we return, shall we look at this big picture one by one? Yes, let's look at the symbols one by one in and what kind of new financial system the world will transition to. What is your prediction? Let's talk about that again. Sir, 20 hours continues where it left off. I'm going to a short commercial break. Yes, we have entered the last half hour of 20 hours. Meanwhile, American President Donald Trump made a statement on live television. We didn't go to Epstein Island. The Democrats did. He says, well, he absolutely denies the allegations regarding Epstein. As you know, some email correspondence has surfaced recently. In these correspondences, including with U.S. Ambassador Tom Barrack, allegations were floating around that Trump knew about the girls. Trump denies all these allegations. We have nothing to do with this island or what's going on. He denies it. There's also the Venezuela file. As you know, America could launch an attack or intervene in Venezuela at any time. Maduro recently sent a message to Trump with John Lennon's song, Imagine. He said, I wish all the people living all in peace. I wish the whole world would live in peace. But Trump says, we'll probably talk to Maduro. Maybe he'll postpone this operation. I don't know. Well, I wish the world were at peace, but it wasn't. It looks like it won't be. We're with Hamza Yardımcıoğlu. We're talking about the cover of the World Ahad 2026. You're the Economist. Let me get you here once more. Now you're saying that 2026 will be a very critical year in all its dimensions and that chaos is coming. Well, there are warships everywhere. You know, there's war here. Missiles are being fired here. There are tanks everywhere. There are tanks here. There are tanks everywhere. I'm watching a visual here as if we're in a war environment. There's not much about peace here. Well, swords are drawn. Well, we see Trump here and we see something like an interesting Viking ship here. Which parts of it would you like to talk about? Oh, and what you're talking about is digital autocrats, that is, technology, social media and the entire data market, our digital data, that is, everywhere. The autocrats watching on the ground.
We see a brain here, a joystick there, I don't know, drugs, narcotics, etc. Maybe there are some of these too. A new order where they can directly control our brains. I'm listening. The brain is an electronic brain. This cable is like a vein in a blood vessel. Look, there are two swords opposing each other. On one side is America, Donald Trump, on the other side is China, Xi Jinping. And they're pointing at each other. But China's sword passes right through the middle of this cable. Now, here's artificial intelligence against America. Look, this brain control and joystick are connected, or artificial intelligence, and these technologies, chip technologies, China says it can cut your vein. In other words, China talks about this potential, saying, you can be victorious there, you can be victorious there.
So,
When do states attack abroad? They need war. When they can't promise their own society economic prosperity or a bright future, they promise security. A government that wants to keep itself, strong, shouldn't send me away. So, you have to promise something. You have nothing economically. You've exhausted everything. Then you say, I promise you security. To promise security, you first need to create an insecure environment. You need to create the conditions for war. This is the case in all wars in history. Look, they're all struggling with economic crises, and that's what's deepening them even further. That's why, even America is on the verge of attacking Venezuela right now, having stationed its ships. We just gave their statements. Yes, they're making preparations for Venezuela. Maduro said he could talk. He rejected the Epstein files. If you look at that, Putin was also saying, we don't have any attack plans, so and so on, before attacking Ukraine. Then we saw that he directly advanced to the Donbass region. Of course, he did this by winning over the separatists there to his side. And do you know that there's an opposition in Venezuela that supports the American operation? I mean, the Maduro government opposes this. They even declared a state of emergency. They're providing militia training and other things. They've formed their own militias and such. But the opposition in the Venezuelan parliament is saying, who opposes America's operations against the cartels? If they do, they're partners with those cartels. It's a narco state, and you're making money with those cartels. That's why you oppose it. There's a faction within Venezuelan politics right now that supports the American attack, and something similar is happening in Mexico, for example. This whole thing started with the cartels. The cartels brought the presidency there, and a woman who was actually a cartel supporter, and a woman in their service, did something as president. The triggering factor was a man named Carlos Manzo, the mayor, who opposes these cartels and is loved by the people. They killed him, assassinated him. That's where the events began, and Generation Z is not retreating from the streets right now. In Mexico, they believe the cartels are not doing enough to combat the cartels and are leaving them without a future, so they're taking serious action. These are called Gen Z actions, Generation Z actions. Shall we break this down, friends? Let's take the first two close-ups first. Yes, now, you've explained this here. So, you're talking about a new world order where anyone who objects can be handcuffed, where Generation Z will actually pay the price for their actions. And here, the United States is celebrating its 250th anniversary. I didn't understand this, dude. When I first saw it, I said, what is this ship? Because it's a historical figure. There are two figures inside, and there's a cube. Look, it's holding a cube. It's holding a red cube used in ancient times. In fact, it's weird. Why would you keep it on a boat like that? You put the cube in, right? It's like you're offering it, like an altar. At first, I thought it was a Phoenician ship. Then, because 2,000 years ago, they dominated trade in the Mediterranean. They were very strong in maritime trade and all that. Then I thought, what's the defining characteristic here? I remembered the hats, and then I thought, these could be fricks back then. They have frick hats, but they're a little more inclined forward. The Smurfs have hats.
Yes, the
Smurfs are actually fricks. Quote, so, he described a communist communal order there. That cartoon also contains many references, which is a separate topic, but then I looked at it. Who else wore this hat in history? It's conical, but there's another distinguishing detail here. Look, do you see this? The pattern on Gelkin. I researched this pattern, this thing, goes back to ancient Greece. It was later used in the Roman period. You know, a Greco-Roman distinguishing feature. Right, I said green there. Then, this time, another topic came up. So, when you say Greek or Roman, when you look at today's equivalent, there are two centers in the world that claim to be the representative, the continuation of Rome. One of them is the Vatican, the other is the Greek Patriarchate of Constantinople, Istanbul. So, you know, in the meetings in the United States, the system, but it's much more of a background reading, but at the forefront are all these trends, for example, electric vehicles. We saw them in the previous one. If you know what electric cars are, in fact, let me ask Reggie something. You're great at 24, 25, and 26. Okay, you're saying this. The electric vehicle was also in the 2024 predictions, but it's something developed by humans, not engineering. You're saying this isn't a coincidence. So, let's go back to the 2025 cover.
You'll tell me a minute. Let me illustrate the relationship between the two. The car was there on the 2024 cover. We see the electric car here again on the 2025 cover. I'm listening now.
Electric cars are a symbol of dispossession. When you buy an electric car, it has software. You actually think you're buying it. You're just buying the right to use it. A very striking example. About 2 years ago, Elon Musk gifted Chechen President Ramzan Kadyrov a Tesla. Yes. Later, he attached a gun to the top and shared photos like this. You never know. He shared a picture of the car on his Twitter account and wrote this. He wrote this himself. The car was turned off because it was being used for its intended purpose. All systems were turned off. So, you think you actually have the key, but they can turn it off with a single button. Even this is being debated. For example, do you use electric heating with a subscription system? You think you bought a car. Electric cars are the most important companies in this transition, in the Industrial Revolution, for example, Henry Ford, right? That's car production. Of course, these steam engines began with railways, but then the construction of highways was a crucial cornerstone of the automotive industry and the Industrial Revolution at that time. The capital economy, protected and defended property. Property rights, and therefore the car, were property. Now, there's the dimension of the house, then there's the dimension of the car. We'll talk about that home aspect separately, but cars are something entirely yours to use, but you think you own. This ownership-free world has been exposed to this since the very beginning, as the World Economic Forum has put it. We won't own anything without ownership. We'll rent everything. We'll rent. You think the new order is something like this? So, right now, for example, housing is the world's largest real estate partnerships. All companies, of course, do this. A company owns millions of apartments, houses, and constantly rents them out, even giants right now. Look at the owners of these large corporations, like Bill Gates and then Bezos. And they establish foundations. They constantly transfer their assets to foundations. Everyone thinks, oh, look, these people also fit the ownership-free concept, but how charitable they are. Yet, in an ownership-free world, they will protect their own wealth through foundations, but they will rent everything out to the entire world. In other words, the world of the future is digital, where ownership has been eliminated because capitalism has become a debt economy. A capital economy.
Everyone is in debt right now.
Everyone is in debt. This is what we call neoliberalism, which has been going on since '71. And this time, it will turn into something that seems so contradictory. Socialism, corporate socialism, property, but it's a public thing governed by the state or bureaucracy, not a subject matter, but an understanding of socialism under the ownership, control, and management of corporations, in other words, corporate socialism.
This is an interesting thing, because right now, when we look at the world, there's a major housing crisis. Well, there's a major property crisis. No one can buy anything. They can't access anything. They can only rent. You think your electric car is one of the symbols of this. Now, on. The 2025 cover, this was last year's prediction. On the 2025 cover of the Economist magazine,
Both use the same symbol. And right now, Japan is the world's primary source of liquidity, and right now, everyone, or rather, markets, are fixated on Japanese interest rates, and the world is on the verge of a major economic crisis. This will be a massive economic crisis. In fact, a depression, a Great Depression, a depression bigger than the one in 1929 is coming right now. They're already comparing it to the depressions of the world wars. Sociological developments too. Who is this? What is this? We're still talking about last year, or rather, the year we're living in, right now, we're talking about 2025. This raised fist, represents the people's demand for rights. Here, it represents people's demands for rights like freedom, democracy, and equality. And it's seen in red here because we'll see it on the 2026 cover shortly. This time, we'll see the same fist raised in blue. It's in
Blue.
because it represents the Republican Party. Red represents the color. Blue represents the Democrats. We'll see that duality through those colors. There's a lot of opposition.
So, in 2025, the Republican Party was in revolt. They won the elections. Now, it's the Democratic Party. Who is this?
This is a former painter who defended women's rights. I can't think of his name right now, but they included him as one of the 2025 global trends regarding women's rights.
So, these were the 2025 predictions. So far, we've given 2024. We've given 2025. Now, can we see all three side by side? And after we see all three, we'll start talking about 2026. What will happen next year? That was 2024 with Hamza Yardımcıoğlu. The cover of the World Ahad Economist. Even when Trump was running in the American elections and Kamala Harris wasn't actually against him, black means uncertain. So, this is also uncertain, and it has a question mark on it. Is he electable? Here we see a dove. Here we see two fish. We see an hourglass and a ballot box. We see an illustration here about the American elections. Here we see the dollar sign again. Here and
There.
we see the yen sign. Here, we see a process related to electric cars, rare earths, and elements, and energy. Again, we see a mechanism where brains are connected to each other by technological cables. For example,
We will see something similar in 2026. Here, the single eye represents absolute dominance and control. Here, it depicts a digital dystopian world where control of brains is again tied to a central center.
a digital dystopian world. Like 1984, Big Brother is watching us. There's an eye here again. We see the hourglass again. Trump has lost the elections this time. Well, there's no Trump in 2025, but Trump is at the center again, and around him are world leaders. Yes, we see them all here too. Well, we see a red fist here. Now, let's talk about next year's cover. Next year's cover is the World Ahad 2026-26. Let's look at the headlines. Trending headlines. Geopolitical drift. Geopolitical axis shift. Opportune for China. A new era is beginning for China. After Gaza. What will happen after Gaza? Outlook for the Middle East. Remapping the Middle East. Beyond Ukraine. What will Russia do after Ukraine? Will it
Advance towards Europe? I mean, will it advance towards France after Ukraine? Be in World War II?
So, the global economy is a crisis brewing. Is a crisis coming in the global economy, you say? You say it's coming, you say it's coming. Sporting values, that's another interesting headline. Here we see a football player. Well, political football, meaning the transfer of Western or other football players with large transfer fees in the Saudi Arabian and Chinese leagues, weight loss drugs. Weight loss injections, and the cover of 2026, that is, next year. Now let's change it again. Let's focus on 2026. The world ahead. Yes, okay, I'm listening, Hamza. There's a blue fist here again.
Now let me explain this picture as a complete conclusion. Then let's fill in the blanks. Here's what it says. The world in 2025 is a soccer ball. Well, a shot has been taken and it's moving through the air towards its target, though there's a chance it might miss. It's a chaotic world on a drifting soccer ball.
You're right. The player here.
Kick the ball. Yes, this is the world. Okay, yes. It will be a year of great chaos. At the center of this year, scroll down and show it there, Ozan. First, there will be a general photo of the United States. Is
that what he
meant with that cake? We'll explain why. Now, let me explain something general like this. What does he mean here? He's depicting the United States. Because is it the 250th anniversary of America's founding? The 250th anniversary will be on July 4th, 2026. He's saying that, in America, America is, after all, the world's darling. So, let's understand this not just for America, but for the whole world. Street movements, large protests, and football will be part of this. So, we'll also encounter large street movements during the World Cup. For example, there were huge protests in Fast. It had put forward its bid for the World Cup to host it. That's
Right, I remember.
people were saying, women died in the hospital. 6 pregnant women died because of lack of food. And in one night, within a few days, that was the final thing, the breaking point. He said, there were major uprisings like this in America, Canada, and Brazil, saying, we want a hospital, not a stadium. Single quote.